moral writings and philosophy, and at least a little bit. Okay? We're thinking about ethical dilemmas in a very structured way, and kind of hidden in the background are a lot of these big ideas, these important concepts of moral philosophy. Then you list all your options. You list all the alternatives, whether you're going to use them or not. Well, one option may be to lie, to be dishonest, to submit a false report. That's an option. It's not supported by your ethical reasoning, but it's an option potentially. You write out all your options here as your final bit of analysis. And then the final D in DAD, you make a decision. And it's a decision that's now rooted in a very logical, sequential, well-reasoned approach that's rooted in a lot of philosophy and empirical research. Okay? You choose the best alternative. You've got a reasoned justification for your decision. And then you monitor and evaluate the situation because things may change and you may have to revisit it. Maybe do a quick run through the model again. Okay? You see how it's very strict. For I don't know if you've got Myers-Briggs folks in here. This is ISTJ, ESTJ folk. These are the engineers. They like the structure, right? Structured approach. Everyone understand how that works? Okay. I think this is a great approach to use, even let's say you think there is some trouble in the organization, and somehow you are somehow related to it, whatever way. You do this as well. Even though this isn't your problem, you want to look at the situation. And folks, now someone comes to you and say, "Well, why did you do that? Why did you take that action against that subordinate?" Well, here, this is how I saw the situation. Here's a description of the facts as I knew them to be. I assessed the situation based upon multiple perspectives. I analyzed it based upon my understanding of my responsibility as a supervisor and as a scientist and as a public official. I've looked at it from multiple modes of ethical reasoning. I looked at all my options. This was the best option at this time for these reasons. Wow. Powerful. So any questions about the decision-making tool?
I'm just curious if there are potential consequences of how you document the options that you like the one you said where you falsify a report or something.
That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I do it kind of more as a personal diary kind of thing. Yeah. Not putting it on letterhead, posting it. But that's a very interesting question, one that I haven't thought about, and one that you may want to consider when you're memorializing this. Yeah, I kind of do more of a scratch. It's not policy necessarily, although it's more like personal notes to yourself. Interesting question.
Is that you sit down at your computer and do that, and even if you wipe it out, it's still on the computer, and that can be gotten to.
So that good point. So yeah, be careful because these are also personal thoughts as well. Policy of the organization. Good question. Steve shared with me some of the questions that had been submitted. What I usually like to do is to test drive this tool and see if it helps us at all in terms of navigating through dilemmas that are commonly faced in the organization. If it's okay, I'll just read one or two of these and we'll kind of work through the instrument. Let's see here. If we are at a workshop conference and there are vendors, some of whom submit work for our review, giving away freebies, such as huggers, pens, hats, etc., to all attendees that come by their booth, can we accept these?
Yes. Okay.
So you already went out, unless you went through the tool in a really quick manner, right? So, the interesting question, can you get some freebies when you're going to trade shows or associations, meetings, and things like that? Again, the facts of the situation are pretty they're well stated here. Stakeholders, I mean, who's involved? I mean, me as the recipient, right? The giver, right? Do we truly know their motive? No. Not exactly. Sometimes we think it's altruistic. They want to thank us for being good state employees, right? Yeah. Sometimes they have alternative motives, so we're not exactly clear there. Our agency could potentially be impacted.
They always want to get your contact information.
Right. And there may be other folks, other folks around the booth who are competitors, right? So we've got a lot of stakeholders who potentially could be impacted here, right? Duties and obligations, again, we're acting in the public interest. We're not trying to use our official position to aggrandize our personal position, right? So there are some duties there. Are there any virtues? What would a good person do? Freely offered, of not substantial value, right? Pens and mouse pads and things like that, coffee mugs and things like that. What would a good person do? I don't know, virtue ethics. You may say, well, there's a positive relationship here. Maybe this person is a friend. You're just trying to be a nice guy. Principles, yeah.
It's not so much the acceptance or the gift, it's how you use it. And they give these out for advertisement. Mm-hmm. So if I've got a coffee mug with some company's name on it, then I'm giving preference to that company.
Okay. So there could be appearance.
Preference to it, but you're giving the impression you may be giving preference.
Well, if the competitor
the same
comes
thing.
in and I'm drinking out of his competitor's coffee mug, I think there's a problem.
Okay,
Well,
so
again, you may not really be giving preference, but his impression may be you are, and that's just as bad.
You're providing advertisement for that company.
Right. So again, and you get that because you're thinking broadly about who the stakeholders are. And the appearance, we've got conflict of interest. There's the statewide law now that really doesn't apply to many of us. But those conflicts of interest are real. And we've got a code of ethics. If we're looking for principles, it says avoid the appearance of conflicts of interest. External source of moral guidance. There may be some advisory opinions on this as well. If you look at the state of New York, where I started my public service career, there are very, very detailed regulations about these particular types of situations. And the State Ethics Commission, as well as the advisory opinions, will probably allow this because it's of inconsequential amount. Usually they have dollar limits in some of these things about what can be taken. But you have to look at the policies and procedures, the rules of the organization. Those are principles.
Another principle I think applies here is that it's freely available to a large number
Absolutely.
of people. It's not you personally.
That's right. And that's how it's oftentimes couched. And that's what sometimes happens when I heard some examples of, you're out there in the field and someone offers you a quart of strawberries or corn right from the field. How do you handle it? The federal government is very specific about these kinds of things, where if it's not freely available to everyone, which was the case there are ways to deal with those situations. You either dispose of the product, destroy it, or you put it in the break room, and then you make it freely available to everyone in the organization. Or you say no. Right, exactly. So, again, what you're doing is you're consulting principles that may be in the ASPO code or your profession's code of ethics, the rules and regulations of the organization, state law. The consequences, well, you never know what will happen. I remember my first experience with a situation like this. I was involved in a procurement situation with the state of New York, and we were holding a vendors conference, and afterwards, one of the guys who was going to bid on the RFP just had a couple of extra questions. It was going to buy a cup of coffee. Back when coffee was probably like a quarter. And the guy I was with, my senior, the person who was senior to me, said, no, we can't do that. Because I would be sharing information that should be shared to everyone, all potential vendors, and he didn't want to be seen in any kind of situation where a person would buy a cup of coffee. Okay? So it can get pretty extreme, but this person was concerned about the appearance of conflict of interest. I think maybe eventually we'll head down that route